Good morning. Welcome to Shields and Arrows, where we defend the faith, the family, the fellowship. I'm Pastor Mark Baze. Thank you for joining us on our Friday edition. And today we're going to do a little bit of some theology, but almost culture as well. It's a mix of the two, because I want to talk about how small churches can win. Now, there were a lot of people, and maybe my claim to fame, at least with many people on YouTube and whatnot, is a particular video that I did called Small Churches, the Tip of the Spear. And my point was that if we want to recapture the culture in our country, specifically in America, but that could expand beyond to the other nations as well that used to be much more Christian in its values, biblically based, then the true answer is not going to be these large churches, the mega churches, but not even those, but even the churches that have multiple services, who have this full ministry staff that works full time for them all week. The fact is they are not going to be the way that we take the culture back. And there's some key reasons for it. I've talked about it at length before. But a lot of people, when you look at this video, and I'll just go ahead and pull it up for you if you haven't ever seen it before, and it's on YouTube is the one obviously where it's gotten the most views. Worshify just doesn't quite have the same wide audience. But if you go right here and you click on small churches, right now, as it sits, it's slowed down a little bit as YouTube videos do. But here's the video right here, and 147,000 views is where we are right now. 4.7 thousand likes. Dislikes, I believe is, I don't even care. I'll just show you my analytics, because that does not matter to me. I don't know how many actual YouTube channels would even show you this. But let's see if I can find engagement. So where's our likes to dislikes? So here's our likes to dislikes. Small churches, 96.7%. Likes, 151 dislikes. Okay, that's how open and honest I am, right? There's the ratio. 4,759 likes to 151 dislikes. And for the most part, it was quite positive. A lot of people really did appreciate it. As a matter of fact, it's kind of funny. This video is somewhat having a little bit of a revival. It's actually increasing a little bit in the number of people watching it right now. It just kind of goes and it flows and ebbs. But the people that were negative in response to it, all right, those that didn't like it, one of their big things that they really responded negatively towards is, why are you pitting small churches versus large? We're all on the same team. And I decided to be a little bit more provocative in my approach today, even with the title, How Small Churches Can Win. And I do see it that way. I don't see it for a competition's sake, as in small churches get to rub it in the face of these larger churches, that they get to insult these larger churches, and it's all for vain pride and glory. No, I think that the reason why I want small churches to win is because if small churches can win the battle for people who go to church, it actually is going to mean more people are going to be able to have sound understanding of the Bible. That's why I want churches to win, small churches to win. And I want to talk about how they can, all right? How can they do that? And I'm probably going to make a video. I'm probably going to make a video on defending the faith, that is going to encompass this, embody this. It's just a matter of time before I get it done, I get it made. As you know, the Defending the Faith videos, I think, maybe this was still playing, but these are kind of intensive, some of the editing that takes place, and I've got to be on location for a lot of this. But how small churches can win. The fact is it's a struggle, and in my first ever video talking about small churches, it's clear that the large churches have the appeal, right? People like the larger churches because they have all the nice commodities, they have the nice facilities, they have up-to-date equipment, maybe even in their presentation, the latest and greatest sound stage, all of the things that would attract people, new everything, right? Or if not new, they have I'll say this, some of the larger churches are even older churches, and you have a little bit more of that classical church look. My church, if you were to look at blue, I'll just show you. Not to, I love our church. I think it's a pretty church for what it is. But it certainly is not a. It's not a fancy looking church. It's not even like the church building itself is not that old. Now the church itself has been around for quite some time. But if you look, here it is. And it's a very pretty church, don't get me wrong, I love our church. But let me show you a picture here of it, or more like a still image of the video. But there it is, right? That's our church. That's the main sanctuary area right here. And my office is right over here. And then you've got our education building, and that's about it. It's expanded metal on the sides. It's not rock going all the way around. And it's pretty modest looking. It's more it's more modernish, and that's what the church could afford, right? Truth be told, you can't just afford to have the ability to build all brick or all rock, as much as I'd like it. But it's a pretty modest looking building. So you have both spectrums. The larger churches, either they are brand new buildings that were able to use something more than expanded metal and be able to really make it look modern and cool. On the other hand, you have the older churches that have been established for a long time, and they do have the benefit. They're downtown. They're the large First Baptist church. They're the large whatever church. They have the nice brick, nice rock, you name it. And so they have that visual appeal. People like the way it looks, right? And so there's that. There's the mass appeal. A major factor when it comes to people going to a small church versus a large church, and this cannot be overstated. Small churches have inherently more pressure to be involved. The great thing about large churches, for a lot of people, they view it as a great thing, is you get to kind of hide out in the larger churches. And if you are watching this, you probably know what I'm talking about. Maybe you've done it yourself, or you just know people that it's much easier to be a casual member of a large church. Kind of are able to hide in the crowd. Yeah, the greeters, they'll talk to you, and maybe the pastor will see every now and then, but hey, you don't need to volunteer to mow the yard or teach a kids class or help out on, Saturday cleanup day, because there's people for that, right? People do that stuff. We have staff. We pay people to do that kind of stuff around here. And so there is no pressure for you to volunteer, to give your extra time. And that's why you like to go there, because if you go to the local small church, they may need a little bit of help. They don't have a cleaning crew that they pay. Ladies that clean the church is Miss, Patty and Sally Mae. They're retired, and Sunday afternoons they come up to the church and clean. And they could always use extra help. Who would want to give up a Saturday afternoon to clean? Or VBS is coming up in the summertime. You're going to need volunteers. If you go to that church, you might feel pressured, maybe feel a little bit guilty about not helping out, committing a little bit of time. Now, some of that pressure is probably undue. I think sometimes people put more pressure on themselves than what they should. I've never looked down upon somebody for not volunteering at VBS. But at the same time, it's always great if you're willing to help, because we can always use help because we're a small church. So people like to avoid those like the plague, right? We avoid it, less work for us. We can just show up on our own time. They have multiple services, so hey, if we slept in, we can make it to the later one. Or I like the more traditional music. We'll go to that old folks ones in which they cram all the old people in there, don't mix them with the young. We need our young, cool people to have their own special service with the worship band and everything. It's just a lot easier. A lot more laid back, right? Well, how can small churches combat this? How can you overcome the disparity between the resources, the funding, the resources, the accommodations, all those things, right? I think that some churches, small churches, have tried to approach it in a certain way, and they're going about it all wrong. Because they look around, and it's true, the church that I'm at right now, back in its prime, right? We're talking mid-1900s, maybe the late 1970s, early 80s. If you look at that member roll, that little country church out in Blue, Oklahoma, had 130, 140 people coming to that church regularly, busting at the seams. Full-time pastor, had a parsonage, the whole 9 yards. Now our church isn't even half that. Right? I think that in some ways that we're growing in a lot of ways. Families are coming, but we're not anything like the numbers were. So they're looking around, their numbers are dwindling, and guess what? They know their neighbor. There's the Smiths down the road. The Smiths, well, I know their daddy. Mr. Smith, back when he was alive, he was a member at our church. He helped build that building right there. He replaced the roof when we had that storm. But you know where the Smiths go now? They drive 25, 30 minutes into town to go to the big church. They don't go to that little old country church anymore. So you're thinking, what are we going to do? We're in trouble. Our church is going to shrivel up and die. This is where they take a terrible approach. They operate under the wrong premise, okay? In desperation, in trying to figure out how to save their church, what they do is they look at the big churches. They look at the format. They look at the pastor, okay? Pastor, maybe in some of these larger churches, he's an older man. Maybe in those larger churches, he's a little more, in a few of these larger churches, he's kind of gruff and he gets real fiery. But I'll tell you this. The trend is not the old school hellfire brimstone pastor. Certainly not one that uses a King James. The style is more of a 40-something-year-old, maybe early 50s, maybe, that's getting a little old, but more of a frat boy, okay? He doesn't dress like an old-style preacher anymore. Maybe wears a sports coat, but it's not any normal cut. It's some skinny, basically the skinny jeans version of a sports coat. And his style is not so old school anymore. It's a lot more of he's more of a hype guy, motivational guy. Maybe gets a little more emotional. Now, those old pastors, they may get a little emotional, but their emotions are more in the form of, in intensity, maybe a little bit of anger, maybe a little bit of serious serious dad talk. Now it's more of an emotional wearing their heart on their sleeve, right? More vulnerable. Makes people feel a little bit more comfortable. So they start looking for that. They look at the big churches, that's what the pastors look like, we're going to find one. So they find some, truth be told, an ambitious younger guy who sees this church as a stepping stone, who wants to add 10, 20 people, put it on his resume, apply to the next big church, and then keep climbing the ladder. So these small churches will go through preacher after preacher after preacher very often. They'll get rid of the old pastor that they have because, he's old. He's not exciting. He's not like those younger pastors he's not exciting like those other churches. He's not with it. He doesn't know how to operate in today's world. And they completely change their services. They will have somebody come in to start leading their music. And it'll start kind of slow. They'll slowly transition from hymns, and probably what'll happen is this guy or girl or whoever's leading their music will do a special. It's modern music. Our church sometimes will do a more modern song, but what they do is they start making it more frequently. Now there's 2 specials. Maybe one at the beginning they sing a special, then they go into the congregation. And then all of a sudden, the next thing you know, the congregation's expected to join along. The older people don't know the words, but they'll have them sing it anyways. There'll be a couple young people maybe in the church, and they'll start singing those, and that's the latest and greatest worship song anyways. And then before you know it, they've completely phased out the old hymns, and now they're just singing a bunch of modern stuff. Because that's what the big churches do. And after all, they think the modern songs are going to bring the people in. Because that's what they want. They don't want to hear those old, boring hymns. I'll Fly Away? Oh, come on now. That's too old. We need to talk about some modern music that repeats the same chorus over and over again. And so that's what they'll do. The older people in the church, that's been their church forever. They're not going to abandon it. They may not like it. They're going to miss the old hymns, but may not really speak up much about it. After all, they're trying to help the church. They're trying to save the church. Maybe that's what they got to do. And then they'll change Sunday school. They'll change its name. Now it's life groups. They'll come up with some neat name for their Sunday service. Welcome to the turning point, or welcome to our life session. I don't know. They'll come up with some name. Everything will start to be more commercialized, advertised. They'll start trying to basically mimic everything that the big churches are doing in hopes of attracting those people. Here's the first step in correcting course. If you are a small church and you are trying to figure out what to do, do not, I'm going to say this again, do not try to mimic the large churches. Okay? Don't do it. Here's why. The people go to big churches because they're big churches. That's why. Why would they go to you when you are the diet version? You are the sequel. You are the parody of the real thing. They don't want to go to your little church that's trying to copy the big church down the road. They want the big church. So I'm going to tell you something that sounds extremely surprising. Stop going after those people. Stop trying to appeal to them. let them go. Let them go. The Smiths, let them go. I know that you would love for them to be back in the church. They don't want to go to your church. They don't want to. They're not interested in being a part of the little country church. They don't care. They don't care. Their life is too busy. Their kids have ball games. They've got events. They got stuff they do. They don't have time to go to your church. Stop trying to appeal to them. I'm not saying don't be friendly. And you can invite them. Go by and say hi. Tell them you missed them. But don't try to make your church fit what you think they want, because they don't want you. If they wanted you, they would be there. That's some hard stuff, isn't it? That hurts. Because you all know people, at least I do, and I know some of you are not attending a local church because you can't find a local church that's worth going to. And I get it, all right? Very few churches do a good job of teaching the Bible. But I hope that we have some churches that will survive. With all that being said, you got to let it go. You got to let it go. It's almost like you would not tell, all right? You would not tell your friend, your daughter, your son, whoever, to change everything about themselves to try to appeal to somebody. But yet that's what we try to make our churches do. Here's what you do. Here's the solution. Stop trying to appeal to particular people and make your church a church that appeals to people who are serious about studying God's Word and being involved in a ministry that is actually committed to the gospel. That's what you do. So, step number one, if you're a small church and you look around and your church is diminishing, which it probably is, that's why it's small, right? At least in a sense. You need to orient yourself to being a Bible-based church. What do I mean by that? You need to find a pastor. Maybe your current pastor does. Maybe he doesn't. You need to find a pastor who actually teaches doctrine. A pastor that, especially an older pastor, somebody in their, I think, late 30s, early 40s, if they are not willing to be opened about their eschatology, their view on Bible translations, or their positions on dispensational versus covenant theology, I'm going to be really blunt. They ain't worth anything. They ain't worth anything. How's that for Oklahoma? I understand if there's a young man, 20s, early 30s, there's going to be some things he hasn't figured out. There's some things I'm still working on. I'm trying to figure out exactly where are the missing years in Daniel's prophecy. Are there some missing years from when Messiah gets cut off to the implementing of the age of grace? How does that work? Trying to figure that part out. Not sure yet. When it comes to other matters, though, I've had some good mentors, right? Parents, they talk to me about eschatology. Dr. White's talked to me about eschatology. I have a position, okay? You've heard me articulate it time and time again. So a young man who hasn't had the same level of mentoring and whatnot, you can go a little bit easy on them. But any pastor who has been doing this for a decade or so, if he cannot be open about his view on the Bible and everything is still so baseline, let's just talk about being like Jesus instead of talking about what the Bible really says, then you need to find somebody who can man up and do the job, because that's exactly what those large churches are doing. Go to a large church and find a church that talks about tribulation, reconciling, endure to the end with saved by grace through faith. That will define the kingdom. That will explain their view on Bible translation. Received text versus critical text. Which translation is best? You're not going to hardly find one. You're not going to hardly find one. There's only a few out there. They're more of your celebrity pastors anyways. You have John MacArthur. He's pretty open on a lot of stuff. I'm not saying he's a good theologian. I disagree with him on a lot of things. I admire him for standing up to the government. I can say all sorts of things about him that's positive. But when it comes to theology, I'm going to say what I say. And that doesn't, I don't agree with him. You've got David Jeremiah. You know, he's one of the better conservative guys as far as all that, has eschatology that he'll address. But most of them don't. Those big churches, they're not talking about it, because guess what? They want to avoid anything that's controversial, anything that causes conflict, anything that might cause division, because after all, we got to keep those numbers up. We can't be running people off because I say their favorite Bible translation's wrong. Or I can't be running people off because I say the kingdom's not about us. I can't say that. So you've got to find a pastor who's going to actually teach the Bible. Your focus as a small church should not be a fun-sized version of the large church, right? A Halloween candy-sized version of the large church. It needs to be a Bible-based church. Start there. Make it your focus. And do it more than once a week. Have Bible study multiple times a week. Whether that is a Sunday morning and Sunday night, or a Sunday night and Wednesday night, or a Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night, like we do at Blue. You got to teach the Bible. These large churches, you will be amazed. The pastor will teach really one lesson a week. One. That's it. All the studying he does. That one Sunday sermon. Because there's people for the rest. There's somebody else to do the life groups. You meet on your own time and study together as a group. So you've got to start being a Bible-based church, meeting multiple times a week, teaching multiple times a week. Another matter is the pressure to volunteer. It can be an issue. Some small churches have made a lot of mistakes by making it almost essential that the second you're a member, you're expected to do X, Y, and Z. You've got to cut that out. Okay, you got to stop that. Because you'll run people off. People want to join a church because they value what you're doing, and they will hope maybe one day to be involved. But you can't just immediately throw them into the fire. You got to be understanding. You got to let them work at their own pace. And this is the next problem. Also, wanting to mimic the large churches, churches will try to take on more than they can chew. These smaller churches will try to have the missions team. They will try to have a massive children's night ministry. They'll try to do life groups. They'll try to do this. They'll try to do that. They'll have something going on almost every night of the week. And people are expected to be involved. People have lives. Okay? There's a lot going on in your lives, especially if you have families. You don't need a dozen different Sunday school classes. One of the problems that smaller churches have, we need Sunday school teachers, we need Sunday school teachers, we need Sunday school teachers. How many teachers do you need? Well, we need a class for the first graders and the second graders and the third graders. And then we need a class for the fourth, fifth, and sixth. But sometimes they can be a lot, so we need helpers, we need this, we need that. So next thing you know, your church that maybe has, I don't know, a dozen people between the ages of 25 and 45, they're all having to teach a class. And they're never getting to sit in on a lesson from the pastor. They're never getting the opportunity to learn. They're just going to church and working the whole time. It's their weekend. They don't want to have to work the whole time. Instead, maybe we consolidate some things. Maybe you do first through third and then fourth through sixth, and it's just one teacher for each one. That's 2 people. Easy. And then anybody age 5 and younger, except for maybe your tiny babies, the mothers can honestly take care of them. But if you have a nursery worker, that's great. You should need no more than 4 people for 0 to 12. The older kids, ready? Here's an amazing thought. So 4 people, 0 through 12. The older kids, so many churches like, we need youth ministers, we need youth ministers, we need youth ministers. A youth minister is a luxury. It's a luxury. They're nice to have, aren't they? I would love to have one. We're looking for one. Thankfully, we have a budget. We can afford one. Not full-time, but we can afford to pay you a little bit, help you with gas. Love to have you. But you know what? We don't have one. You know what they do? They go with me. They go with me. Pastor takes care of the rest of the adults that aren't working in classes. Maybe you can split it up some more. And our church does have it split up some more. And that's fine. I believe fully a small church that if you run under 60 people or so, you can handle Sunday school class, your nursery worker, your, 3 through 5. Then you have or maybe 3 through 6, and then you have your 7 to 9, 10 to 12. There's your 4 people, and then guess what? Watch this. Everybody else, 5. 5 people needed for your Sunday school. It's pretty simple, isn't it? And they say, but we can't do that. We got to have more. We got to have more classes. We got to have more options. No, you don't. No, you don't. You can. It's great if you can. It's a great opportunity if you have enough to do that. Our church has more than that. What I'm saying is you can have it done. Stop trying to do too much with too little. You need to keep it simple. You need to do a good job with a few things. You need to have a few projects, ministries, work that you do, and you need to do a great job with it. Don't spread yourself too thin. That way, you're not going to be demanding so many things of others. When it comes to music, nobody. All right, let's look at the top 25 right now. Let's look at top worship songs. Top worship songs. Here's the praise charts. This week's top 20 worship songs. Here we go. I don't know how accurate this is, but let's just take a look at it. Goodness of God. Okay. Goodness of God, yep. That song is probably going to be popular for another 10 years maybe, and then it's going to be done. Holy Forever. I don't know, I haven't heard that one. It's probably going to be popular for a few years and done. Gratitude, a few years and done. Great are you, Lord, few years and done. How great is our God? That one's persisted for a while. You know, some do come out that are pretty popular. Theology of that song, it's a little iffy in some places. It'll probably persist a little while. Firm foundation, that one's not going to last very long. Build my life, no. I speak Jesus, what does that even mean? Amazing Grace, my chains are gone. That's just a copy of Amazing Grace. It doesn't. They even gave John Newton credit there, so that doesn't even count. If you'll just stick to the hymns, the traditional songs, those songs are still going to be relevant in 500 years. Well, unless Christ comes back, and people are still speaking English around here, we'll see how long that lasts. They'll still be relevant. Stop trying to chase the latest and greatest. Stick to the classics. You already have a hymnal right there. Life is much easier, isn't it? And what you're going to find, there'll be some people in your church leave. They won't like it that you just teach the Bible. They will want flash. They will want motivation. They'll want intensity. They will not like it that you just teach the Bible. They'll find it boring. They will want music. You know where they're going to go? They're going to go to the same place that they were eventually going to go, and you just sped up the process. They're going to go to the big church down the road. Best of luck to them. And you will get low for a little while. But here's going to be an amazing thing that happens. Sometime in the future, some people are going to show up at your church. They may be quiet and reserved. They may not even say much. And they're going to come, and they're going to just keep showing up. You're not doing anything special. You shake their hand, you know their name. You haven't done some special ministry outreach with them, some major church event. They didn't come for a meal. They just came. They brought their Bibles. They sat and they listened. They were there for the service, and they left. And they'll just keep doing that. And more people will just keep doing that. And before you know it, you're going to have maybe the same number of people that you had before, but these people are going to be of a different stock. They are going to listen to your sermons. They are going to anticipate that when they show up, they're going to be learning what the Bible says. They're not coming to hear you give a motivational, rah-rah speech. They don't care about that. They really don't even need you to lecture to them about how to be a good parent or how to be a good person, obedient, honest. They're not really worried about that. Truth is, they may be better parents and more honest and all that than you are. But they want you to tell them what the Bible says and present it as accurately as possible. And that's what they want. That's what they expect. That's what they're wanting to get out of it. They want to sing the classic hymns, and they want to just go to church. They don't want the flash. They don't want t-shirts. They don't want coffee mugs. They just want to study the Bible, and they want to fellowship with like-minded believers. And you may just find that it is easier to get volunteers, and your doors will stay open because they will care about what you're doing, and they'll support you in multiple ways. You may not attract the people that you want. You may not be getting those young crowds. You're probably going to get some people who are pretty traditional, old school. They'll probably have, they'll have their nice clothes. They'll maybe have a brand new pair of Levi's that they wear instead of their work clothes. But that'll be your coalition. That'll be your fighting force. And they'll be much stronger than you ever were. And another thing you'll find is some of those original members that you had, as you start sharing with them, yeah, you may lose a few, but you know what? All of a sudden, you're going to find that those members that were with you originally, they're studying their Bibles. They have questions. They're excited because they're growing and they're learning. And they're looking forward to your sermons. They're telling you that the sermons feel like they're going by too fast, that they get to listen to you for another hour. The old tired tale that sermons are boring because they last too long. There are people that preach boring sermons, but a sermon that is Bible content focused, that actually addresses the truth of the matter, it's not long. Podcasts have proven people can listen to hours of something that they're interested in. If you cannot sit through a 30-minute sermon or a 40-minute sermon that is content-based, focused on the Bible, and you are bored, that's a you problem, whether you want to admit it or not. So that's my recommendation to churches today. That's my recommendation of how we can fix them things. Nancy says, with an online ministry, in addition to the brick and mortar, you can invite your audience to become members from a distance. That is true. That is true. Y'all are always welcomed to join our church anytime you'd like. All right, there was my closing thoughts, my stump speech on how small churches can win. All right, now let's talk really quickly about this article I found on Christianity Today. You'll always find some of the most peculiar statements, but let's consider this. This is an article from Marvin Olasky, a columnist, a guest columnist for Christianity Today. Triumphalism after Dobbs was a mistake. We're going to follow along his logic here and see what he has to say. His major point right here at the bottom of this picture right here is that the pro-life movement has forgotten its roots. We need to get back to basics. So let's see what his suggestions are, what his complaints are. He testifies, I've been in the pro-life movement for 40 years. My wife founded the Austin Crisis Pregnancy Center in 1984 and later chaired the National Umbrella Group for Centers, CareNet. I don't know much about these, but we've also personally helped unmarried women unhappily surprised by pregnancy. One lived with us for 9 months, during which time she gave birth. Another got married in our living room and also gave birth, although happily not in our living room. In 1988 and 1922, 2021, and 2023, I produced 4 pro-life books in the history of abortion. So a lot of time and service for pro-life matters, probably more than many people that I'm talking to today. Maybe more than anybody that I've talked to today. Let's see how this person feels about the post-Dobbs America. That personal history is why I don't lightly say that much of the pro-life movement has lost its way. First things recently opined. Is that a definition? Do I get a definition on this word here? Oh, okay. I don't know, but that was interesting. Opined, Dobbs versus Jackson, Women's Health Organization. You'll learn that my vocabulary is not always the most extensive. So the idea that the Dobbs versus Jackson's decision was a great victory for pro-life cause. His position, no, it wasn't. The number of abortions is apparently rising. This is an interesting position that you will find amongst many who claim, support, that it was very bad for us to overturn Roe v. Wade. That it actually would have been better for pro-lifers if Roe v. Wade would not have been overturned. I'll remind you, Roe v. Wade put into law, it was a ruling by the Supreme Court that Abortion is legal. You have a legal right to it in all states. You would think that the overturning of that by the Dobbs decision, meaning that it's not a right, therefore it goes back to the states to vote on, is better, right? That because some states could maybe vote to abolish abortion, or at least put some restrictions on it that Roe v. Wade would not have allowed for. You would think that's a good thing, but these pro-lifers say, no, no, no. It's very bad that Roe v. Wade was overturned because this is what they say, the number of abortions is apparently rising. Now, we're going to talk about why that could be the case. I'll explain that in a moment. But let me ask you this. Let's just look at this very practically. You put into law that it is illegal to steal. Make it very simple. Illegal to steal. The next year, the number of thefts increase. Do you say that it was a mistake then to make it illegal to steal? That you should then make it legal to steal just because more took place after the illegalizing of it? Illegalizing? Once again, broad vocabulary. I think that's a real word. I think that we would all say, no, just because people engaged in it did not mean that it was a bad thing to make it illegal. Yet that's exactly what these pro-lifers want to say. That it's bad that we struck down Roe v. Wade because there were more abortions the next year. Correlation does not equal causation, always. I think that we need to consider about the principles of the matter. The moral position. The moral position is that it's not a right. Is that not important? Does that not matter? And actually taking a position on it? He says Dobbs was a great opportunity for the pro-life movement to show our recognition that unwanted pregnancies are hard. Was that really the most important part of the pro-life movement? Is that really like our major focus? That to say that unwanted pregnancies are hard? Or is our main focus to stop killing babies? Because I think the whole point of it is to stop killing babies. Now, there's two different sides of this when it comes to pro-life. There's the moral matter first and foremost. It's wrong to kill babies. Then there's the actual means by which we start changing the culture of the things. Changing the culture would be acknowledging that unwanted pregnancies are hard. So therefore, we do our best to help you. That is where he's going to be going with this. But the truth is, I see a lot of parallels between the matter of abortion and the matter of slavery. Now, I will say this, and there will be people that will get mad. Not you, you get it, but people that listen otherwise. Abortion is a greater moral evil than slavery. Slavery did not actively engage in the legalized killing. Now, I'm sure that there were slaves that were killed, no doubt about it. But these things are not morally the same. Abortion is a greater moral evil, and that's just the reality of the matter. But when slavery was abolished post-Civil War, did that mean that the actual implementation of thought and ideology to stand for the values of all men being created equal, were those immediately implemented? I don't think so. We had the Jim Crow laws that were in effect in our country. Many people that I'm talking to now are probably alive for some of those Jim Crow laws to see them struck down. But what came first? The law saying that slavery was illegal. Are you going to say that it was a bad thing to make slavery illegal because then the same moral issues and divisions and ideologies were still present? So should they have kept slavery legalized and then changed the culture first? That's what the matter is. I'm not saying that the opportunities of Dobbs has not been botched in some ways. Maybe we've misstepped. But this is almost a lamenting of the Dobbs decision and the striking down of Roe v. Wade. Let's continue what he's saying. They are especially hard the small percentage of the time that rape or incest are involved, but they are hard all the time. I don't think anybody argues that. All pregnancies have their challenges, truth be told. A truly compassionate pro-life perspective shows that children need protection and their parents need support. What pro-life position doesn't hold to that? That children need protection and parents need support. Is there anybody here that's pro-life that's not for children needing protection and parents needing support? Now, what kind of support, though? Are we going to be taking money out of people's wallets by the federal government and then redistributing it? Or are we willing to volunteer or donate to crisis pregnancy centers that seek to help families? This is where things get interesting. Now, if we want to talk about tax cuts for families, I'm fine with that. I think taxes, by and large, are just theft anyways. Let's consider what he says here. But instead of emphasizing both, some politicians have talked so tough that it seemed pro-lifers might treat miscarriages as crime scenes. I don't know where he's claiming that. I think this sounds like a very liberal talking point, which Christianity Today is a very liberal site nowadays. Miscarriages are always a tragedy. The loss of a pregnancy, loss of a baby is always extremely tough for any family that's endured it, and many of you have. They're a common thing that does take place. This argument of miscarriages, such a straw man. I don't see any politicians arguing it. Now, with that being said, if there's been a position argued that it should be treated as a person has perished, I can see the legal argument for it because we're claiming that that baby has rights. Even though the baby's inside the womb, not born yet, the baby has the right to life. Therefore, if there's a miscarriage, we could at least acknowledge there was a person that we lost. We lost a baby. But it's a straw man argument that he's making there. Many pro-lifers failed to understand the mourning on the other side. 50 years of reproductive rights down the tubes. Reproductive rights. He's adopting the very language that the pro-choice position uses. Reproductive rights. We rightly so pointed out Trump's use of it. Now, Trump did not specify, though, what he meant by reproductive rights. Trump may have been referring to IVF, which IVF has some ethical problems as well, depending on how it's done. Okay, it does have some ethical problems in many cases. But reproductive rights down the tubes, this is clearly in line with abortion. Why are you adopting it? Here we go. Let's just substitute pro-lifers with slave owners. Many slave owners, or pro-lifers, abolitionists. Many abolitionists failed to understand the mourning on the other side. 50 years of slave-owning rights down the tubes. These slave owners, now they're not going to be able to make near as much of a crop. How are they going to feed their families if they can't have workers? What about the rights of the slave owners? Some women, slave owners, had come to believe that the only way they could prosper in our society was through the use of slaves. It was hard for many to imagine how they could flourish without slavery. And yes, this is a fair comparison. Absolutely. Absolutely, it is. yes, there have been some women who have been lied to and told that the only way that they would have fair treatment is if they had absolute bodily autonomy, even if that meant killing their own babies. I'm not saying there isn't an important matter of trying to articulate it to these women and get them to understand our position. I think this is more lamenting the fact that pro-lifers have actually had a little bit more backbone lately. For a long time, they were just real quiet on it, wouldn't really speak to the matter. It was more of like losing with dignity. Now that Dobbs has been implemented, Roe v. Wade struck down, now they've won. At least that aspect of it. I'm not saying that we can't communicate better, maybe show some compassion. But if you're only ever compassion and smooth or soothing talking, almost apologetic, you're never going to get anywhere. That's why Republicans were just losing until Trump came along and just started calling things out for what they were. You've got to get aggressive sometimes. People, may not like it, like me as a pastor. They say that I'm too aggressive, that I'm, why can't you speak a little more nicely? People don't listen to you when you're just nice all the time. Sometimes you got to get a little bit blunt. You have to be brutally honest. Pro-lifers had an opportunity to help women imagine meaningful lives even with unexpected babies. Our side should have acknowledged that Dobbs was scary to many women. Maybe there's some cases in which this was not articulated well. I don't know. But the truth is, who is the main focus? The main focus are the babies. That's what we're really focused on right now, okay? His whole thing is we need to consider the mothers. We've thrown the mothers out. I don't think that's the case. That's always the strongman argument against pro-life, is that you only care about the babies being born, not the mothers, or caring for the babies after they're born. You know what we do care? You know what we say? Women need to get married. And your husband needs to provide and care for the family. And you need to be a part of a church. You need to have a support system. People don't like that, though. We've been pushing it the whole time. We encourage marriage, traditional marriage, and being a part of a community, preferably some kind of church. That's what we recommend. And you will get the support that you need. We could have built a movement to support more generous family policies. Instead, many pro-lifers went for force first. So he's saying instead of striking down the laws that allow murdering babies, giving it a right to murder babies, we should have tried to implement some family policies. So it sounds like he wants more government rules. Now, I'm all for lifting taxes on families, but what kind of policies are you talking about here? Are you talking about welfare? You need to be more forward. You need to be more clear, because we're not for welfare. Welfare helps no one. Okay, it's been a major failure. What kind of policies are you talking about? With Dobbs liberating states to legislate as they saw fit, some pro-life advocates competed to see who could back the toughest laws. Some pro-lifers in Oklahoma and elsewhere wanted women who had abortions to be charged with murder. Okay, maybe, but is that the mainstream view? This is straw man. That is not the main view. You are arguing against the Dobbs decision as a liberal would. I understand your heart and your concern for the women, but you using straw man positions on fringe ideas, this is not an accurate presentation of the pro-life movement. You have some grievances that you are taking out on everybody else that I think you got to work on. The result was a transformation of a popular narrative from concern for the unborn and their mothers to a thirst for power and control. You sound like you should be on MSNBC. No pro-lifer talks like that. You know what pro-lifers talk about? We say we need to stop murdering babies, and here's a crisis pregnancy center. We're going to make sure that it's stocked with diapers, baby food, clothes, you name it, so these mothers can have help. That's what we want to do. You are not being an accurate representative. It sounds like you are taking issue and you're finding straw men in order to support your grievances. Maybe you liked losing on the matter instead of actually winning. One reason why the abortion rates may have increased is due to the abortion pills. That's a technology that's come out now that will actually result in a miscarriage, that causes a miscarriage. Today's technological reality is that 2/3 of abortions occur via abortion pills, often ingested at home rather than in abortion centers. Closing down those centers is more and more like shuttering pornography stores rendered irrelevant by streaming services. So do you think it's good to have pornography stores? Both are bad. Would we agree with that? But it would be better then. Now, I understand that there probably would be not near as many engaging in it if you could just go to a store. Or if you had to go to the store to be seen in public, that'd be shameful, right? It'd be a shameful thing to do. You'd probably be some more backdoor ways of doing things. But the position here, though, that's not the direct correlation. The direct correlation would be to say pornography is not a right, and now states are voting on if you have a right to it or not, or to what extent. Is that not something that we would be in support of? That the states could vote on those matters? I'd be in favor of that. Because it's a moral wrong. Today's technological reality of it. Goes on and says, stopping pills by law would require opening mail, frisking visitors, and going after senders based in states. Yeah, because we have no laws about pills, illegal pills, right? There's no drug laws at all in place. I mean, could we imagine trying to enforce drug laws? How silly that would be. Pretty tone deaf. Convincing parents one by one or two by two to not to kill their unborn babies is more important than ever. Well, of course, we agree with that. Here we go. This is the rub, I think. The political reality is of two kinds. The obvious problem is that the identification of pro-life belief with former President Trump and the Republican Party, remade in his image, has been a public opinion disaster. This is the problem. This is evangelical who hates Trump. Whether you like it or not, Trump has been the most pro-life candidate we've ever had. Plain and simple. George Bush did nothing. Ronald Reagan did nothing. Okay? Some can write off polls as irrelevant when lives are at stake, but Abraham Lincoln wisely said, with public sentiment, nothing can fail. Without it, nothing can succeed. Consequently, he who made public sentiment goes deeper than those who enact statutes or pronounces decisions. The problem of pledging allegiance to an unethical leader doubled in my state of Texas, where Attorney General Kent... So, what's your position here? Trump said, send it back to the states. Would you support a national abortion ban? I think we could all agree that a national abortion ban morally is correct. How well would it fare in our country? It would not fare very well. So what's the alternative? You support Trump, who says, let the states vote on it, or you support Kamala Harris that says abortion up to the point of birth, even though she lied about it in the debate. Attorney General Ken Paxton, impeached following allegations of corruption and bribery, is the best-known pro-life spokesman. He fought Kate Cox, then the 31-year-old mother of two, who sought an undesired abortion in an exceptionally hard case, chasing her out of Texas with only a pro-life win in the style of ancient saying, "One more victory and we are undone." The second problem, more complex than individual nastiness, is the denial of the reality that although God does not judge by appearances, most Americans do. The closer unborn children are to birth, the more they look like born children, the more their protection has broad support. Most Americans support abortion early in pregnancy, but only 22% nationally support its legality during the third trimester. Instead of thinking like Lincoln and building off where pro-lifers' support is greatest, some pro-life leaders are campaigning against in vitro fertilization, which produces the very earliest unborn children. The tiny ones deserve protection, but that's the hardest case to make in terms of... So wait, you had an issue with Trump, and yet Trump is not against IVF. Even though some people have issue with IVF. I have issues with IVF and how it's done in many cases. So it seems like a lot of grievances here. I think that we need to realize that Dobbs was a very good decision, and now we need to vote in a case-by-case basis with the states. Or each state is going to be a case-by-case basis. We agree that it's a moral evil. Are these things done overnight? No. You had slavery that took a long time. There were many that didn't want slavery in the very founding of the nation. Then after post-Civil War, slavery was abolished. But then you still had Jim Crow and segregation and all those things that occurred. It's a long, hard fight. But don't completely throw out how good Dobbs was just because you have some grievances with how some pro-lifers are approaching it, or these very fringe people. I think that moral ambiguity is the case here. Trying to argue moral ambiguity instead of just acknowledging that Dobbs was a good thing. If you have grievances with politicians and whatnot, don't let it cause you to want to complain otherwise. All right, that's about it for our show today. We will be back tomorrow. No, it's not. It's Friday. We're going to be back on Monday, but stay tuned. Sunday we'll have several different sessions we'll be touching on. Thank you all so much for joining us. Appreciate each and every one of you. Go to markbazeministries.org and you can support our ministry. Thank you all so much. We'll see you later.